friends. Welcome to a very special edition of Scott Fox After 9. Today, you're going to hear Prime Minister Mark Carney's remarks to the World Economic Forum in full. I think it's important that every Canadian hear what the Prime Minister had to say yesterday because it was a major departure from our previous doctrine on foreign affairs to a brand new one that some are calling the Carney Doctrine. What the Prime Minister announced yesterday was not particularly new. We've known it's coming for a while, and it feels like the goal over the last number of weeks is for the Prime Minister to sort of ease Canadians into the way things will be. And he made very clear the way things were is not the way things are, and certainly not the way things will be. It was a very profound speech from the Prime Minister yesterday. Myself, as a conservative, I can fully acknowledge the Prime Minister was very well spoken yesterday. I'm told he wrote this speech himself. I don't know if that's true or not, but it is very similar to some of the speeches he's given in the past. But this time, he really polished it up for the globalist audience in Davos. In this, I am going to play a little bit of the Prime Minister. Then I'm going to offer you a little bit of context and clarity from my lens as a conservative. And I want to make that clear that, yes, I do consider myself a conservative. I tend to lean right on a lot of issues. And I'm doing that because you should know my bias. Everyone who has a bias that's trying to relay information, and yes, I'm looking at you, mainstream media, they should declare their bias. So I am setting the tone here by declaring mine. Let's go through the Prime Minister's speech and also some of the comments that he made during a one-on-one panel discussion as well. A lot of really interesting stuff came out, and I'll tell you that while today's episode is dedicated entirely to Mark Carney, tomorrow's episode is mainly going to be dedicated to President Trump's speech, which is happening right now as I record. Let's go to yesterday, Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum. Here's Prime Minister Mark Carney.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. So what are our options? In 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with the greengrocer. Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window: "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to signal compliance, to get along. And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false. Havel called this living within a lie. The system's power comes not from its truth, but from everyone's willingness to perform as if it were true. And its fragility comes from the same source. When even one person stops performing, when the greengrocer removes his sign, the illusion begins to crack. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down. For decades.
Okay, well, the Prime Minister gets some applause there. And by the way, spoiler alert, he ends up getting a standing ovation for this speech. What the Prime Minister's goal in this speech is not just to tell the global elites of Davos his vision of the New World Order, but also to tell countries around the world where things are going. Here's the New World Order. If you didn't hear my episode on this that I published just a few episodes ago, it was over the weekend, you should give it a listen because I talked about the New World Order. Since the end of the Cold War, the New World Order had the U.S. basically as the world's police, the world's major superpower. Well, now power is starting to diversify. The emergence of megapowers like China, Russia, India, and the list goes on. And the world is going into a much more fragmented place. There was a big push that was happening for a while, and I have to think it started at the World Economic Forum for a globalist government, a one world government. And with the election of Donald Trump in the States, those plans have been greatly derailed. One of the main architects of that globalist structure around the world was Mark Carney himself. He is intimately tied to the World Economic Forum. Later on in this episode, you'll hear him get asked about being a globalist himself, and you'll hear his thoughts on that. Mark Carney was one of the people who believed in a one world government. And if Joe Biden were still in office, or if Kamala Harris had won the election, the U.S. would be all in on it too. But Donald Trump getting reelected changed the game. Now the globalists have got to pivot. And that's basically the theme of this year's World Economic Forum. They want to re-explain their ideas and try and salvage that globalist mentality out of the ashes, because it looks like it's on life support thanks to the election of Donald Trump. Mark Carney is going to be a leader here and signal the way that things are probably going. And the way things are going, the new world order is a bunch of regional superpowers. China's going to control their side of the world. America is going to control the Western Hemisphere, and so on and so forth. But that leaves a whole bunch of smaller or mid-level countries to decide which side they want to be on. And that's the decision that the Prime Minister needs to get right here. He's got to decide which side Canada is on. Or he's got to form an alliance with all of the other middle powers in the world and try and create a mega power out of a bunch of middle powers. Hopefully that made sense. That's the way this is going, and that's largely what the Prime Minister speaks about in this speech.
For decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institutions, we praised its principles, we benefited from its predictability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals. And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, the architecture, the very architecture of collective problem solving are under threat.
What Mark Carney is referring to here is the fact that Donald Trump, one of the first things he did when he got reelected was withdraw the U.S. from the World Health Organization. He has no time for the World Trade Organization. He has no time for the United Nations. All these globalist bodies that were set to under the planned New World Order, the globalist New World Order, those were going to be the official bodies that made the decisions for the whole world. Donald Trump has pulled out, and now the Prime Minister has got to explain to the mega powers and to the middle powers that that's over. That rules-based system, when he says rules-based system, that's what he's referring to. All of those multinational bodies that were set to become world leaders. They're now irrelevant, and what's going to prevail is deals one-on-one between countries. The Prime Minister making a loose reference there to the fact that we got very integrated with the Americans, and then the Americans saw an opportunity to exploit us. Now, that's his look at it through his lens as Prime Minister. Many people wouldn't say that. A lot of people don't think integration was our weakness. A lot of people think integration was our strength. We were already very integrated with the Americans. We just couldn't work out a deal on specific areas to integrate us even further. And what the Prime Minister is saying here is that we will not be reliant on one superpower. We're going to try and do other deals in a new world that doesn't follow the old rules-based system with all those multinational bodies. It's going to be a lot of bilateral deals or trilateral deals between countries.
And as a result, many countries are drawing the same conclusions, that they must develop greater strategic autonomy in energy, food, critical minerals, in finance and supply chains. And this impulse is understandable. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. But let's be clear-eyed about where this leads. A world of fortresses will be poorer, more fragile, and less sustainable. And there's another truth. If great powers abandon even the pretense of rules and values for the unhindered pursuit of their power and interests, the gains from transactionalism will become harder to replicate. Hegemons cannot continually monetize their relationships. Allies will diversify to hedge against uncertainty. They'll buy insurance, increase options in order to rebuild sovereignty. Sovereignty that was once grounded in rules but will increasingly be anchored in the ability to withstand pressure. This room knows this is classic risk management. Risk management comes at a price. But that cost of strategic autonomy, of sovereignty, can also be shared. Collective investments in resilience are cheaper than everyone building their own fortresses. Shared standards reduce fragmentations. Complementarities are positive sum. And the question for middle powers like Canada is not whether to adapt to the new reality. We must. The question is whether we adapt by simply building higher walls or whether we can do something more ambitious. Now, Canada was amongst the first to hear the wake-up call, leading us to fundamentally shift our strategic posture. Canadians know that our old, comfortable assumptions that our geography and alliance memberships automatically conferred prosperity and security, that assumption is no longer valid. And our new approach rests on what Alexander Stubb, the President of Finland, has termed value-based realism. Or to put another way, we aim to be both principled and pragmatic. Principled in our commitment to fundamental values, sovereignty, territorial integrity, the prohibition of the use of force except when consistent with the UN Charter, and respect for human rights. And pragmatic in recognizing that progress is often incremental, that interests diverge, that not every partner will share all of our values. So we're engaging broadly, strategically, with open eyes. We actively take on the world as it is, not wait around for a world we wish to be.
The Prime Minister basically holding a funeral here for the old world order. The one where the U.S. is the world police, the one where the U.S. is the world's biggest superpower. We are diversifying as a planet, and that's going to mean that everybody has to pick a side. The Prime Minister touting there that we would like to share our values and things like that around the world. That's not really consistent, though, with the deal we did with China. But the Prime Minister also acknowledged that we're going to have to work with countries even if we don't share their values. Is that okay with you? That's one of the things I want to understand, because what the Prime Minister is basically saying here is that our relationship with the Americans is over. If you read into the overtones, the way I hear this speech, he's basically holding a funeral for Canada-U.S. relations. We'll deal with them when we have to, but we're not counting on them for much. Is that really the right approach? Or should we get back to what we were doing? It wasn't that long ago, Mark Carney was assuring Canadians he could get a deal done with the Americans, and it seems like he was the one who basically ended the possibility of doing that. Mark Carney has been traveling around the world trying to diversify our trade, and that's great. He is going to some countries who fundamentally we have some big differences with, particularly when it comes to human rights. Are we going to hold our nose and be okay with that? Or should we just get back to the table and try and work out a deal with the Americans? You see, under the New World Order, you're going to see the emergence of other superpowers. China is going to be a major player, and Mark Carney has done the first of what I assume will be many deals with the Chinese. Do we want to be embedded with the Chinese, or do we want to be with the Americans? And one of the questions we're all going to have to ask ourselves soon is, which side do we want to be on? On one hand, you've got the Americans. That trusted relationship that's on the rocks right now, but it always worked, and there's no reason to think it won't work once we come to a better deal. Or do we want to go the globalist route? Do we want to team up with China and lean in on green technology and things like that? I mean, that's a decision that all Canadians are going to have to make for themselves at some point soon. And it's going to have to be based on our own personal values and the way that we individually see the world. We're not going to all agree on that. There's going to be many people that feel strongly we should be aligning ourselves with the Americans. The Americans are pulling out of the globalist agenda. If that's the way the world was going, and there's no reason to think that's not the way the world was going, the Americans are out. They're going to chill in the Western Hemisphere. They're going to control this part of the world, but they want no part of the multinational bodies making all the decisions for the world's citizens. Is Canada going to lean into the globalist side of things, or are we going to align ourselves with the Chinese? And if we do align ourselves with the Chinese, what is that going to mean for future relations with the Americans? And right now, the vast majority of our trade is done with the Americans.
We are calibrating our relationships so their depth reflects our values. And we're prioritizing broad engagement to maximize our influence. Given the fluidity of the world at the moment, the risks that this poses, and the stakes for what comes next. And we are no longer just relying on the strength of our values, but also the value of our strength. We are building that strength at home. Since my government took office, we have cut taxes on incomes, on capital gains, and business investment. We have removed all federal barriers to interprovincial trade. We are fast-tracking $1 trillion of investments in energy, AI, critical minerals, new trade corridors, and beyond. We're doubling our defense spending by the end of this decade, and we're doing so in ways that build our domestic industries. And we are rapidly diversifying abroad.
Just before I let the Prime Minister continue, I don't know if anybody's going to fact check him on that, but that one I will point out is highly misleading. To go to Davos and tell that room full of global elites, Canada cut taxes and we're creating conditions for businesses and we cut out all of the interprovincial trade barriers. I mean, I think the average Canadian knows that's simply not true. The tax cut amounted to nothing because they raised the payroll tax. So the tax cut has been completely wiped off. As far as getting rid of all of the interprovincial trade barriers, maybe the feds cleared the way for it, but the provinces still haven't pulled down those interprovincial trade barriers. You still can't buy BC wine in Ontario. It's absolutely bananas that after all that bluster over the last number of months, we still haven't figured it out and truly made ourselves our own best customer and truly allowed free trade within our own country. Again, good job by the Prime Minister so far, but that part in particular, gotta call it out, that's not right.
Agreed a comprehensive strategic partnership with the EU, including joining SAFE, the European Defence Procurement Arrangements. We have signed 12 other trade and security deals on 4 continents in 6 months. In the past few days, we've concluded new strategic partnerships with China and Qatar. We're negotiating free trade pacts with India, ASEAN, Thailand, Philippines, and Mercosur. We're doing something else. To help solve global problems, we're pursuing variable geometry. In other words, different coalitions for different issues based on common values and interests. So on Ukraine, we're a core member of the Coalition of the Willing and one of the largest per capita contributors to its defense and security. On Arctic sovereignty, we stand firmly with Greenland and Denmark and fully support their unique right to determine Greenland's future.
The Prime Minister is... that's something that I think is going to be concerning to President Trump and to the Americans. That was a very bold statement by the Prime Minister, and I think by and large, most people agree that they would like Greenland to decide Greenland's fate. But one of the things that I think Prime Minister Carney and Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer and all these other characters are going to have to accept is that the Americans are going to get Greenland. This isn't something that we need to wonder if it's going to happen. It is going to happen, and when it does happen, the Prime Minister here and everyone else is going to have to find a way to be okay with it. It's going to happen. The U.S. is going to get Greenland. It's going to be an American territory, possibly a state. They're going to negotiate it. And I have a feeling that in the end, Greenlandic people are probably going to choose America. Not just America choose them. They're going to choose America. And I hope that the Prime Minister can at least acknowledge that if the Greenlandic people say they want to be American, I hope that he can acknowledge that that's okay and he gets behind it. What does Denmark have to do with this? Absolutely nothing. Denmark's had a lot of opportunity to do something with Greenland. Decades and decades and decades, and nothing got done. If the Americans want Greenland and the Greenlandic people want to be with America, the Prime Minister here has got to get out of the way and accept that and help welcome those people to the North American fold. That was a big statement for him to make, and nearest I can tell, it is not sitting well with people in Washington. I would hope that Canada's position would be very simple. What I just said, it's up to the people of Greenland, not Denmark. It's up to Greenland, the people who live there. It's not up to the European Union. It's up to the people who live in Greenland. I don't know why we would take sides on this particular issue except to side with the Greenlandic people. But either way, that's the Prime Minister. He's taken a lot of shots in this speech without actually saying America or Donald Trump. And I'm not sure why. One of the reasons I think that this speech was as popular as it was is because so many people said there was Mark Carney telling it the way it is, standing up to the Americans. I don't quite see it that way. I think if he truly wants to stand up to the Americans, he could at least say, America, I'm talking to you. President Trump, I'm talking to you. And he didn't do that. Maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe it's not as bold as he wants us to think it is. But either way, that's the Prime Minister's current position on Greenland. Watch for that to evolve over the next couple of weeks.
Our commitment to NATO's Article 5 is unwavering. So we're working with our NATO allies, including the Nordic-Baltic 8, to further secure the alliance's northern and western flanks, including through Canada's unprecedented investments in over-the-horizon radar, in submarines, in aircraft, and boots on the ground, boots on the ice. Canada strongly opposes tariffs over Greenland and calls for focused talks to achieve our shared objectives of security and prosperity in the Arctic. On plurilateral trade, we're championing efforts to build a bridge between the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the European Union, which would create a new trading bloc of 1.5 billion people. On critical minerals, we're forming buyers' clubs anchored in the G7 so that the world can diversify away from concentrated supply. And on AI, we're cooperating with like-minded democracies to ensure that we won't ultimately be forced to choose between hegemons and hyperscalers. This is not naive multilateralism, nor is it relying on their institutions. It's building coalitions that work, issues by issue, with partners who share enough common ground to act together. In some cases, this will be the vast majority of nations. What it's doing is creating a dense web of connections across trade, investment, culture, on which we can draw for future challenges and opportunities. Argue the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
That's a good line from the Prime Minister, and yeah, he's absolutely right. We need to be proactive, and we do need to do whatever we have to do to shore up the future of Canada and economic stability. We just have to be careful about how we do it because no matter how you look at it, we still need the Americans. And if what the Prime Minister is saying without saying that our relationship with the Americans is over, save a couple of different issues where we have some common ground, then okay, but he's also got to explain how we're going to replace 76% of our trade overnight. Nothing has changed in the fact that we still need pipelines. We still need ways to get those critical minerals, our LNG and our oil over to these new customers that the Prime Minister is trying to track down. At one point, Justin Trudeau said there was no business case for exporting Canadian LNG. We lost billions and billions and billions of dollars in opportunity there. Japan went to the Americans. Other countries went to the Americans when we said, no, we want to leave it in the ground. Now the Prime Minister's got to figure out a way to not only get it out of the ground quick, but to get it to the customers that want to buy it, if there are any left. Interesting stuff here from Prime Minister Carney. Let's get back to the speech. I'm enjoying this.
But I'd also say that great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, and the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. In a world of great power rivalry, the countries in between have a choice: compete with each other for favor, or to combine to create a third path with impact. We shouldn't allow the rise of hard power to blind us to the fact that the power of legitimacy, integrity, and rules will remain strong if we choose to wield them together. Which brings me back to Havel. What does it mean for middle powers to live the truth? Well, first, it means naming reality. Stop invoking rules-based international order as though it still functions as advertised. Call it what it is: a system of intensifying great power rivalry where the most powerful pursue their interests using economic integration as coercion. It means acting consistently, applying the same standards to allies and rivals. When middle powers criticize economic intimidation from one direction but stay silent when it comes from another, we are keeping the sign in the window. It means building what we claim to believe in. Rather than waiting for the old order to be restored, it means creating institutions and agreements that function as described. And it means reducing the leverage that enables coercion. That's building a strong domestic economy. It should be every government's immediate priority. And diversification internationally is not just economic prudence, it's a material foundation for honest foreign policy, because countries earn the right to principled stands by reducing their vulnerability to retaliation. So Canada. Canada has what the world wants. We are an energy superpower. We hold vast reserves of critical minerals. We have the most educated population in the world. Our pension funds are amongst the world's largest and most sophisticated investors. In other words, we have capital, talent. We also have a government with immense fiscal capacity to act decisively. And we have the values to which many others aspire. Canada is a pluralistic society that works. Our public square is loud, diverse, and free. Canadians remain committed to sustainability. We are a stable and reliable partner in a world that is anything but. A partner that builds and values relationships for the long term. And we have something else. We have a recognition of what's happening and a determination to act accordingly. We understand that this rupture calls for more than adaptation. It calls for honesty about the world as it is. We are taking the sign out of the window. We know the old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. This is the task of the middle powers. The countries that have the most to lose from a world of fortresses and the most to gain from genuine cooperation. The powerful have their power. But we have something too. The capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength at home, and to act together. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us. Thank you very much.
Very, very good speech by Prime Minister Carney. I have absolutely no problem saying that as a conservative. He has come a long way when it comes to delivering a speech. When you think back to a year ago, Mr. And Ah, stumbling, fumbling, and bumbling all over the place. It was awkward and it was embarrassing. That was the best I have heard Prime Minister Mark Carney, bar none. Great speech. Important to say it too. But here's what I would like to do now. I would like to get the Prime Minister to say in clear and plain English what the new world order is. He talks about the rules-based system. I don't know why he doesn't just say what it is. We were working towards a one world government where multinational bodies like the World Health Organization and places like that, we're going to be making the decisions for the entire world. Where places like the World Economic Forum, everybody would gather, go back to their countries, and everybody would be in lockstep for one particular thing. And again, that was the way the world was going. Mark Carney's version of the new world order in his ideal world would have been a globalistic one because he is a globalist. That's not going to happen. The old way, we're not going back to it. The Prime Minister made that very clear. If you liked things the way they were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we're not going back to that. Basically, what the Prime Minister is saying is Canada is a middle power. There are superpowers like Russia, China, America, India in all likelihood, and that list may even keep growing. We have to figure out where the middle powers lie. And what he suggested is we have to be prepared to work with who we have to work with. And sometimes we're going to have to hold our nose and we're just going to have to ignore the fact that some of these new partners have a terrible track record on human rights. And some of them are unsavory individuals that maybe we don't want to deal with. But the Prime Minister says we're going to have to deal with them. I don't necessarily accept that, and I'm not necessarily ready to compromise on my Canadian values that I have grown up with my entire life. I don't think I'm ready to do that. I also don't necessarily want to take direction from the leader of a party who has really lost its way in the last 10 to 15 years, if I'm being honest. The Liberals were the party that tried to tell you men can have babies. The Liberals are the party that tried to tell you that if we don't do something right now and pay more money in taxes, the entire country is going to be underwater in a few months. You know what I mean, though, right? On the climate crisis. There was a lot of gaslighting going on to try and scare Canadians into going along with what Mark Carney wanted for a new world order. But now he has declared that dead. The new world order is going to be one where there are regional powers and there are a whole bunch of middle and small powers below them that have to work with the big powers. Here, we're basically bound to America. They're our neighbor. We share the largest undefended border in the world with the Americans. Are we ready to actually work with them? Or is there some instances where we're going to say, you know what? We don't want to work with you on steel, aluminum, softwood lumber, whatever. We're going to work with other countries on that, maybe China. Well, we have done the deal with the Chinese now for their electric vehicles, and we know the Americans have a big problem with those electric vehicles. It's going to be a really, really fine line that the Prime Minister has to walk here if he wants to manage the relationship with the Americans, but also go out and attract new customers that want to work with Canada. I really wish he hadn't basically held a funeral there for Canada-U.S. relations, because I don't think it needs to be over. It shouldn't be over. We should still be working toward the best deal possible with the Americans. But where the Prime Minister is right is we can't be subservient to the Americans exclusively. We can't say just because we're their northern neighbors that we're going to go along with everything they say. He's got to manage that relationship carefully. And I would like him to be very careful with how much he compromises on our Canadian values. Now, in this episode, a number of times already, I've mentioned to you that Mark Carney is a globalist. Mark Carney, behind the scenes, was pulling the strings. What Justin Trudeau was doing, the way he was taking our country with the open borders, with the soft on crime agenda, with the DEI, and what have you. Mark Carney was in lockstep with the Prime Minister. He was the one telling Justin Trudeau what Trudeau was going to do. And when Trudeau couldn't get it done, Carney said, hold my beer, I'll become Prime Minister and I'll do it myself. That's exactly how this went down. When Trudeau became so toxic that he couldn't advance the agenda anymore, Carney said, you got to go, I'll jump in and do it myself. And that had been rumored for years that Mark Carney was going to be the Prime Minister of Canada someday. And lo and behold, he was. Let's hear a little bit of Prime Minister Carney one-on-one doing a Q&A here. This is a question specifically about him being a globalist.
President Trump and a lot of people who agree with him condemn globalism a lot. And I suspect, you would be the kind of epitome of a globalist. You worked for Goldman Sachs, I believe. You were a central banker. You're comfortable and lived in several countries. Is globalism, first of all, is it a thing? And is it over?
I think, look, understanding how the world works, having an appreciation for other cultures, understanding the connections, and being able to, or at least appreciating ways that how we connect, whether it's through technology, trade, investment, culture, can enrich our lives, and that's a good thing, and also help solve problems. Being detached from where you live and the broader needs of society, there is an epithet for that. I don't know that the G word is the one. There's certainly what we're finding, and to go back to the points I was making, is that there are a number of like-minded countries that want to work through partnership to achieve those goals for their citizens and for the world more broadly. The call is for more to recognize what's really going on right now, and to pool their resources to the benefit of citizens. So it won't be global, it won't cover the globe, but it will be more powerful.
I don't know what question the Prime Minister heard, but the question that he answered was certainly not the one that was asked. Mark Carney is a globalist. There shouldn't be a secret about that, and you shouldn't be afraid to acknowledge that. Mark Carney, as that person interviewing him quite rightly pointed out, was, and forever will be a globalist. Now, the end of that answer, that one was very, very fascinating, because he wouldn't actually say the word globalist, even though he's very much aware of what it means. Let me hear the end of that one more time, because I think that this is a very interesting point that the Prime Minister is making here.
For more to recognize what's really going on right now, and to pool their resources to the benefit of citizens. So it won't be global, it won't cover the globe, but it will be more powerful.
What the Prime Minister is saying there, without actually saying it, is we still don't know what the new world order will hold. Is it going to be globalist in nature, except for America and the Western Hemisphere? Or is the globalist dream dead? Will it be just a bunch of regional superpowers that have all got their own agendas, kind of adversaries, kind of partners, all working together and against each other at the same time? The Prime Minister left the door open there to a one world government for the whole world except America or except the Western Hemisphere. The globalist dream isn't necessarily dead here, guys. That's what Donald Trump has been fighting since he got back into office. He doesn't want the UN making decisions for Americans. He doesn't want the World Health Organization deciding when America goes into lockdown or which vaccine schedule their citizens should be following. That would be giving up your sovereignty. It's almost a little bit ironic that the Prime Minister is talking so strongly here, so strongly about sovereignty, yet Canada was completely willing to go in on the globalist agenda and get rid of our sovereignty in favor of multinational organizations calling the shots.
You also, a big theme of your speech was the need for middle powers to work together. But you've just been to the other great power, to China. And I think people are very intrigued by seeing that meeting. And some people say, kind of, that's a mistake, really, because you're going to make yourself more dependent on China. They're not that benign either. The US will be very annoyed. What's the defense of what you're doing, and what do you hope to get out of it?
Well, the first thing is to say it's not a defense. It's an. I know the way you frame the question, but it's offense. It's building out. It's something positive as opposed to against. We're for something as opposed to being against. The second is, there are very clear guardrails in that relationship. I spoke of calibration of relationships in my remarks. That's what I mean by it. But within those clear guardrails are huge opportunities in energy, both clean and conventional, obviously in motor vehicles, in agriculture, in financial services, all of which is mutually beneficial. So it's additive. And look, it's the second largest economy and it's our second largest trading partner. We should have a strategic partnership with them within those guardrails, and that's what we've achieved.
Interesting of the Prime Minister to frame it like that. The Chinese have interfered in our elections. They have kidnapped and held captive Canadian citizens. They have spied on us. They are actively working against us in the Arctic, and so on and so forth. There are so many red flags here. And the Prime Minister is saying, hey, we've got guardrails up. We know what they're all about, and we're going to keep an eye on it. What if they're smarter than us? What if they're thinking on another level? What if they're playing chess when we're playing checkers? Are we being used here by the Chinese? And is the trade that we are going to agree to with China truly free and fair trade? One of the reasons the U.S. is using tariffs is because there was such a trade imbalance. I'm fully aware that we import a lot of stuff from China. Are we matching that with the right number of exports? Because the exporting is what would be best for Canadian manufacturing and industry and shoring up jobs. Is China accepting Canadian goods freely? We need to talk more about this deal with China because it doesn't sit right with me, guys. It doesn't sit right with me. I'm concerned about it, and I'm really concerned about, and the interviewer there pointed this out quite rightly again. It's going to be a major irritant for the Americans, possibly an obstacle. I've maintained for a long time, Mark Carney doesn't actually want a deal with the Americans. He doesn't want it. He needed to get out of the deal that we were considering signing back in November because he wanted to take a shot at working with the Chinese. He's always wanted to work with the Chinese. Keep in mind, his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, openly talked about how much he admired the Chinese basic dictatorship. Canada and China have had an interesting relationship over the years. The part that we see, the foreign interference, the spying, opening up secret police stations, kidnapping our citizens, things like that. There's more to it going on in the background, and I have to think that the people who are in power in Canada right now don't necessarily have the problem with it that regular Canadians do. The thing is, we as Canadians have a right to have an issue with that.
Another big issue that's going to come up this week is this board of peace that President Trump is keen on. I'm not sure whether it's for Gaza or for the entire world, but apparently Canada's been invited. Are you going to join?
We have been invited, and let me start by, I think we should recognize the progress that has been made in at least getting towards the end of the first phase of this process, and the activation, if I can put it that way, of the process to set up the Board of Peace is the start of phase 2. Our view is, and that's to be welcomed, and this is a positive vehicle. Our view is we need to work on the actual structure of the vehicle. You just referenced, is it for Gaza? Well, the UN resolution, Security Council Resolution 2803, references a Board of Peace for Gaza. That's where we see it becoming immediately operative, and it needs to be, in our view, it's better to be designed in that way for the immediate needs there. There are many other needs around the world, first point. Second point, it needs to coincide with the immediate full flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. We are still not where we need to be. Conditions still are horrific. So that needs to come alongside. We think there's aspects of the governance and the decision-making process that could be improved. But we will work with others, obviously work with the United States, because we will do anything that we can to improve the situation, the horrific situation there, and to move onto a path to a true two-state solution.
Why can't he just say yes? Why can't he just say, yes, we're going to join the Board of Peace? Because if we have a seat at the table, there's much more we can do for Gaza. There's much more that we can do to achieve peace in the Middle East. Just say it. I don't understand why everything has to be so cryptic. You know, I started this thought earlier in the pod and I got a little sidetracked. I was very into that speech. And again, job well done by the Prime Minister. I thought he delivered that well. I thought it was very well written. I don't have a lot of bad things to say about it. But he needs to define who are the big powers and who are the middle powers. He's calling Canada a middle power, and I think that that's a debatable point. I think there's a lot of people who might try to make the case Canada's not a middle power. We're a pretty small fish. We're not on the same plane as Singapore. We're not on the same plane as Japan. We're not on the same plane as Saudi Arabia. You name it. We're not there. We don't have the kind of money they've got. We don't have the kind of clout that they've got, especially when we're trying to find our way now that the relationship with the Americans has been severed. I'm also going to point out here, while this was an excellent speech by the Prime Minister, this government doesn't exactly have a great track record for follow through. How many times have we heard big announcements, big visions for Canada? Heard our prime minister come out and make wild announcements about the future. And nothing ever happens. We know that in Canada. Let me give you an example. Do you remember the big speech, one of the last ones that Trudeau gave about how Canada is going to build, how we're going to build homes for everybody in the country and it's going to be great. We're going to have a wartime effort. When Mark Carney came in, he continued on that legacy and he was the one who used the term wartime effort. 500,000 new homes a year. Where are these homes? Seriously, where are these homes? Because you know what? It doesn't seem like anything is getting done. And that's partially a product of high interest rates, but it's also partially a product of the situation Canada finds itself in. We've got a population that is broke. Last one I'm going to play from the Prime Minister on this all Mark Carney episode of Scott Fox After 9. We've talked about Greenland a number of times over the last couple of days. What's going to happen with Greenland? Why does the U.S. really want it? And is the Russians and the Chinese really that big a threat? Or is Trump just blowing smoke? Please listen to this directly from the mouth of our Canadian Prime Minister about the threats in the Arctic.
And when President Trump says, oh, you know, Greenland's under threat from Russia, even from China, is that for real?
I would say that there are threat. Russia is without question a threat in the Arctic, without question. Russia does lots of horrible things, and I'll take the opportunity to condemn their unjustified and horrific assault on Ukraine, almost at its fourth year. They are a real threat in the Arctic, one against we need to protect, which is why we have 364 5-day air, sea, and land presence. It's why we're adding to our submarine fleet, adding to our air fighter fleet, why we're building out over-the-horizon radar to protect from Russian missile threats and others, and why we will work with our NATO partners.
Is Russia going to bomb us? Why else would we need that radar? Would it be Russia or China? I don't know. Either way, the Prime Minister now confirming that, yes, Russia is a major threat in the Arctic. He didn't talk about China specifically, but we know the Chinese have a great interest in the Arctic. That is a real threat and something you're going to hear much more about today from President Trump when he addresses the World Economic Forum. Today, I dedicated the entire episode to the Prime Minister's speech. I thought it was very well done. It is a major change to Canadian foreign policy, and I think all Canadians should hear it. Feel free to share this episode with anybody who wants to go through the speech and hear a little bit of commentary and analysis like I did in this episode. But before I go, let's talk about what's going to happen tomorrow. Today was all about our Prime Minister. Tomorrow, I'm going to play President Trump's speech to the World Economic Forum. For those who don't know, the World Economic Forum is a liberal convention. These are people squarely on the left that all gather in Davos every single year and talk about their vision for the world. For a Republican president, especially one as bold as Donald Trump, to go to the World Economic Forum, you bet your butt they are listening and they are paying attention. It's not the first time he's gone and addressed this crowd, but every time he does, it's very impactful. And while the president is still speaking now, and again, I'm going to cover it tomorrow, I want to play for you 30 seconds of what President Trump said in his speech today in Davos.
We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your Prime Minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Oh, dear. Mark Carney, I know you didn't say Donald Trump. I know you didn't say America. But everybody knows who you were talking about, and clearly so does President Trump, and he does not sound happy. He didn't even say Prime Minister or Mr. Carney. He just said Mark. Yikes. Okay, well, listen, the whole speech is still being processed. I'm going to have some analysis for you tomorrow in the response from President Trump at the World Economic Forum. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed putting it on for you. Every single day, you get a new episode of Scott Fox After 9, and this is how we do it. I'm going to leave you now with the sounds of Pat James and The Whole Truth. The song is called Hey Now, and you can find it on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, or wherever you get music. Have a great great one, friends. I'll see you in less than 24 hours.